This cast iron skillet has been passed down through 4 generations, but most people throw theirs away after one bad meal. The secret your grandmother knew? It's about to save you thousands in cookware. Cast iron mostly. A long handle, about the length of your forearm. At the business end, there's a flat steel plate with what looks like a row of teeth, except they're not sharp. They're blunt, almost like a tiny rake, except the whole thing pivots on a joint. And right where your palm would grip, there's a mechanism, a simple lever that you'd squeeze and release, squeeze and release. What on earth would your grandmother have needed this for every single day? Most people walking past an antique shop wouldn't even pause. But once you know what it was, you'll start seeing it in old photographs, in farmhouse kitchens, in the hands of women who fed entire families without a single electric appliance. Let me tell you what this strange little tool is and why it mattered so much. This is a flour sifter. And before you think it's simple, listen to why it changed everything about how Americans baked and cooked for nearly 150 years. When your great-grandmother opened a sack of flour in 1900, she wasn't opening what you'd buy today. Flour was dense, compacted from the mill and the shipping journey. It had settled into itself. If you scooped it directly into your bread dough or your biscuit mix, your baked goods would be heavy, dense, ruined. The flour needed air introduced into it. So twice a day, sometimes more, she'd take this sifter, the flour scoop, or the metal cup that came attached, would dip into the flour sack, and she'd squeeze the handle, again and again, forcing the flour through those blunt wires. It aerated the flour. It broke up the compacted clumps. And the result was light, tender biscuits. Fluffy cakes. Bread that rose properly. It was not optional. It was the difference between Sunday dinner and failure. Most sifters had 2 wires or 4, arranged in a grid. Some had 8. The wire pattern was the maker's signature. A good sifter from companies like A&J, out of Philadelphia, became something a bride actually wanted for her hope chest. A sifter was proof you were ready to keep house properly. And they were everywhere. Tin, steel, cast iron, different sizes, some with double handles, some with the squeeze mechanism, others with a rotary crank that turned a flat wheel inside, which pushed the wires around and around. The principle never changed. Air in, lumps out. A woman could tell how good another woman's baking was by how thoroughly she sifted. When self-rising flour came into wider use in the 1920s and 30s, the sifter didn't disappear. Home cooks still used them because they still needed to aerate regular all-purpose flour. The habit was bone deep. But then came processed, pre-sifted flour in bags that promised the work was already done for you. And electricity brought electric mixers with little sifter attachments. By 1960, sifters were already becoming something grandmothers kept in the back of the cupboard because they couldn't throw them away, not because they actually reached for them anymore. And now, almost nobody sifts at all. We've forgotten that flour even needs it. But the sifter wasn't the only secret your grandmother kept in her kitchen. Let me show you something else. This is a butter churn, though you might not recognize it at first. It looks almost like a ceramic crock or a wooden bucket, but look inside. There's a paddle mechanism, a dasher, attached to a long wooden rod. You'd fill this crock maybe half full with fresh cream. And fresh cream was always on hand, because most farmhouses kept 1 or 2 dairy cows. Then you'd move that handle up and down, for 20 minutes, sometimes 45, depending on the temperature and the butterfat content. Your arm would ache. But gradually, the cream would thicken, would break, would separate into butter solids and buttermilk. The buttermilk you'd pour off and drink or bake with. The butter you'd gather up, rinse, work with a butter paddle, salt it, and store it in a root cellar where it would keep for months. This wasn't a luxury. This was survival. In winter, when no cows were milking heavily, stored butter was protein, was fat for cooking, was the difference between having enough and going hungry. Butter churns came in all sizes. Small ceramic ones for a family making a few pounds a week. Enormous wooden barrels for a dairy operation making churns for market. Some had hand cranks with gears. Some were barrel-shaped and rocked side to side. Some farmers would use what they called a churn tub, a tall wooden container where you'd plunge a paddle down and up, that same hypnotic rhythm. Butter making was women's work, almost universally, and it was daily work. Every female child in America learned how to churn before she was 8 years old. It was how you proved you were ready for marriage and a household of your own. Did your grandfather or grandmother have one of these in their kitchen? Tell me below. You'd be surprised how many are still sitting in barns and sheds, and nobody even knows what they are anymore. The remarkable thing about butter churning was how deeply it shaped American rhythm. Farm families organized their day around it. Dinner was when the butter got made. The sound of the churn was the sound of Wednesday afternoon. And then, 120 years after the churn was perfected, electricity and commercial dairy farming made it obsolete in the space of about 30 years. By 1950, most farm families were buying butter, not making it. The churn joined the sifter in the back of the shed, and the knowledge of how to churn was something only the oldest people remembered. Now here's another one your grandmother might have used, and this time it's so small you might miss it in a kitchen drawer. It's a lemon reamer. That's the name, plain as that. Cast iron, usually, or sometimes turned wooden, with a conical ridge in the center, a little cup underneath with a spout. You'd cut a lemon in half, press it firmly onto that cone, twist it, and the juice would run down into the cup and pour out the spout. Before manufactured citric acid and bottled lemon juice, if you wanted lemon in your tea, lemon in your fish sauce, lemon in your preserves, you had to squeeze it by hand. A good wooden reamer could last 50 years. Some families had the same reamer that had belonged to their grandmother's grandmother. A lemon reamer was a tool you trusted. The electric juicer made the reamer look quaint by the 1950s. But even today, plenty of cooks will tell you that a wooden reamer doesn't bruise the fruit the way a metal one does, and it won't extract as much bitter oil from the pith. That's true. But who remembers? The reamer disappeared because machines were faster, and we decided faster was the same as better. Let me show you one more that might genuinely puzzle you. This is a bread maker's peel. It looks like a long, or a paddle, flat wooden blade, maybe the size of your hand or a little bigger, attached to a handle 6 feet long. What would you do with this? In a community bakery, and nearly every town had one, where home cooks would bring their shaped loaves to be baked in the communal oven, the baker would use this peel to slide loaves onto the hot brick floor inside. And then, when they were done, to slide them back out. The length of the handle kept your arm safe from the tremendous heat radiating from the oven. Some peels were metal-tipped on the blade to slide better. Some had little markers, notches carved into the handle, so the baker could tell loaf sizes apart without looking. It was a highly specialized tool for a very particular job, and that job has nearly vanished from American life. These tools built this country, and we let them fade. Hit subscribe so they are not forgotten, and tell me below if your family owned one.